Hello and welcome to the 17th episode of the Meet the Entrepreneur podcast. This is ARTEEN ZAHIRI and I am the co-host of this feature along with RUMEER KESHWANI and ELHAM CHOWDHURY. Today we are speaking with Suelin Chen, co-founder and CEO of Cake. Cake provides a digital platform that makes it easier to do advanced care planning and end-of-life planning. For our audience, could you describe what Cake is?
Sure. So Cake is the world's largest platform for end-of-life planning and post-loss support. So essentially, we're helping people with this part of life that every single person experiences, which is death. And it's really hard for a lot of us, but is actually a really important part of life. And it impacts you not just for yourself, but for every single person you care about as well. So we saw that there was a real need to provide more trusted guidance for consumers as they navigate this area.
That's great. That's great. And I noticed that you mentioned in terms of like your consumer market being on board with, being so open about mortality. How have you guys, maneuvered that and just ensured that people are comfortable in terms of tackling mortality and they actually want to go about planning it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I'll say, when we first started the company, we definitely got feedback from people some investors that nobody thinks about this. The reality is that, some people are definitely resistant and a lot of us feel uncomfortable, but there are people who are actively having to deal with it today, every day. So we've grown our platform from basically 0 to 40 million people a year in just about 2 years, all through SEO and content marketing. And so what we realized from looking at the data is that we're not actually needing to convince people that this is something that they should think about. There's enough people out there. The market is big enough of people who are just actively thinking about it right now. But in addition to that, from a branding perspective, we have been quite thoughtful about how we want to approach this category. We know that it can be very emotional and that people can bring their histories to it, right? Like their cultural background, what's happened to them in their lives. And so we wanted to create a place that we can tackle some more serious issues, but also focus people on the whole point of end-of-life planning, which is to honor life, right? So the only reason that you do end-of-life planning is to make things easier for your loved ones, to honor your life after you've passed, but also to kind of start to curate your impact on the world as well. And so these are all actually positive things. It's a gift to your loved ones to do end-of-life planning. And then after someone dies, trying to take care of all the things that have to happen afterwards, a lot of the stress and anxiety comes around doing things in the right way for that person. And so that's actually kind of a positive thing, like wanting to do what they would have wanted. So we do try to orient all the activity in this space around, this is actually more about life than it is about death.
Definitely. That's very interesting. And I love the positive outlook on death and just how, you guys are tailoring your products around that. One thing that I did find interesting was your overall consumer market. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but your consumer market is unique in the sense that they won't retrieve the services until years or possibly even decades down the line. So how do you ensure that you don't lose connection with your consumer over time, and that that the product or service is still ultimately delivered?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think maybe what you're getting at is that what we're doing, it is a relatively low frequency use case type of thing, right? So it's not like necessarily something you're checking every day. It's maybe more like, same as a company like Zillow or something like that. Like that, home buying is not a high frequency event in people's lives. That said, what we have found is that engaging with mortality and death is a more high frequency event than you might think. So as an example, of course, you only die once in your life, but you touch death many times a year even. When you start to think about it more as in a more comprehensive manner, right? So we help people not only with just planning for their own end of life, but also their loved ones, helping them plan, dealing with loss. And then a really big category for us is actually condolences. So if you know someone who is experiencing loss, you want to support them. So that's kind of another flavor of interacting with death that can happen multiple times a year. Even on our small team, in the last quarter or so, 3 of my team members attended funerals for family members. And this is just happens in life. So I guess this is all to say that we are pulled into the sphere of end of life much more often than you might think. And
Absolutely.
then, and then the other kind of piece to that is that I think the really amazing thing about our business is that when people engage us for end of life planning, they truly want to have a relationship with us for their entire lives. So if you think about like the length of relationship we can have with our consumer customers, it's incredible, right? People are putting down their funeral plans and how they want to be remembered. And a lot of that value, as you were alluding to, gets unlocked when they pass away. That said, people are still getting value today. First, one thing is that life evolves and life changes. So it's not like one and done, like set in stone thing. People do go back and revise their plans and revisit them and things like that. But then also people actually find value in thinking about the end of their lives, just as a framing of thinking about their lives today. And what I mean by that is when you remember that your life is finite, it can help people focus on what's most important to them. And it can be very motivating to think about how you're spending your time and whether you're spending time in the way that's in line with your values. And in fact, we've actually seen that there's a lot of business schools out there that have people do things like write your own obituary, which seems like kind of a weird business school activity maybe, but the purpose of it is to really focus people on how they're thinking about their careers. And what they ultimately want to do. And so, I mean, my personal thinking about this kind of phenomenon is that as human beings, we're not supernaturally good at thinking long-term, like in decades, right? Like we can think about tomorrow and the next week and the next month, but it can be really hard to digest this idea of your life in decades. It's not that intuitive. And so what we hear from our users is that when they engage in end of life planning, it can actually kind of be this positive force in their lives where they can just remember what is most meaningful and important to them.
Definitely. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's very interesting how you guys tie your product to like a person's current life and try to show how it could benefit them living in terms of just their values and what they uphold. So I think that's very cool.
Yeah, and I think it also permeates our company culture, right? So we always talk about like, this is your one life that we know of.
Yeah.
And so what that means is that, we're all here. We're all actively choosing to be here because we can see what a huge impact we can have, positive impact on other human beings and at this huge scale. So like, it's really meaningful work, but then also that we understand that people have full lives that are outside of work as well. And it's it definitely permeates our culture in terms of how we approach the role, I would say, that work should play in life for, at least for our team members. It's something we actively talk about.
For sure. No, that's awesome. I kind of wanted to pivot to sort of your personal experiences. But before I do that, ARTEEN, RUMEER, did you have any questions about cake or?
I'd love to hear definitely like more about kind of like what brought you to cake, Suelin, and like why this is an area you decided to focus on. Then maybe we can touch back in on the product later.
Yeah, sure. So I always knew that I wanted to do something in healthcare, actually. So my undergrad and PhD was at MIT. I was focused on medical technologies, and I thought that that would be how I would make an impact, right? So I never wanted to be a clinician, but I thought, oh, if I could help people live healthier, longer lives, that would be really fulfilling. And so I did go into that field, and then I kind of realized that one of the ways that you make that you can bring technology to patients is through business, right? So then I decided I really needed more business experience. So I went into that. And through all of that, I was spending a lot of time, like a lot of our clients were helping people extend life at the end. So maybe it's like a last line cancer therapeutic and it's going to extend life by another couple months or something like that. That's where I spent a lot of my time. And I just started thinking about, well, then what happens? At some point, no matter how much therapy and medicine and medical intervention you throw at someone, we all end up in the same place. And it just seemed really crazy to me that there wasn't better support for people and their families at that time. And I realized also, because I was quite close to the healthcare system, I didn't really feel like the healthcare system was going to be incented to create that support. I mean, there's certainly exceptions in the healthcare system, but I was just on a systemic level as a whole, I didn't really feel like there was enough support for people. And then, of course, I also experienced loss in my family. And I think what I realized from that experience was that it wasn't any kind of big tragic story of loss, but even in my family, there was quite a lot of conflict around the loss and relationships that were really torn apart due to experiences of loss. And this is so common. I think what was kind of striking to me was that my experience is not unusual at all. And so it just seemed to me like, wow, we spend so much time and energy in thinking about things like birth and bringing a life into the world, and almost none on how a life exits the world. Like the bookends of life should be equally important, but that's not how it is in our society as a whole. And certainly in terms of, how much technology and innovation has gone into improving the experience, definitely when we started Cake, there was very little. Now I'm very excited to say that there's a lot more innovation in this category. But yeah, it just kind of struck me that this is just something that impacts literally every human being. And that it also gets at this core of why are any of us even here? And to me, it also just felt like an interesting place to spend time.
Definitely. I think it's very interesting that you've also tried to simplify it as much as you can, and also have your product as an app, which is really awesome because, that way, like we have apps for alcohol delivery, and we have apps for like almost everything now. And I think the fact that, we're able to bring mortality services to the App Store is really fascinating. So,
Yeah. I always think about it kind of like, this is more like a meta commentary, but I think that the types of problems that are getting solved by technology and startups, like venture capital backed startups, are a reflection of who has access to capital and the types of problems that those entrepreneurs are interested in solving, right? And so, I think that, a lot of that's why there's a lot of apps and like alcohol delivery and dating and like stuff that, and like things that like that, which, there's nothing wrong with that. Those are definitely great problems to solve. But only now are we starting to tackle problems for seniors or end of life stuff, because I feel like a lot of the innovators and entrepreneurs themselves are now at an age where they're actively dealing with it. They're like adult children thinking about their parents or whatever. But then also, I think as access to venture capital expands, hopefully, I think newer and other types of problems will come to light because, different entrepreneurs have different life experiences that they're bringing. They see the world in a different way. They see different problems. And so as you kind of diversify that access to capital, I think you also diversify the problems that can be solved.
Certainly. And speaking of venture capitals, so there's a fascinating story of you online where you shared an experience of you getting your first ever check from an angel investor when you were 9 months pregnant. Honestly, that story is truly inspiring. Obviously, like, we're all men on this panel, so we can't relate whatsoever. So, Could you walk us through that experience and how you were just able to overcome, you know, I know you mentioned you needed blood transfusions after your first complications with birth, and just like a lot of, you know, natural impediments that come your way. But even in spite of all that, you were able to land your first ever check, and take Cake to where it's at now. So if you could walk us through that experience.
Yeah, sure. And I think more broadly speaking, I would say that, you know, as you all probably know, about 2% of venture capital makes it to women. So 2 out of 100.
Wow.
So it's like very, very small amount. And would love, and I went down during the pandemic. And I think that some women choose to be mothers, others not. But regardless of whether they choose or not, I think if you're going to support women entrepreneurs, you also have to support parents that are entrepreneurs. And I do think that as you grow in your career and you see different types of problems to solve, timing wise, there's going to be talented entrepreneurs who are starting companies around the same time they're starting families. That's just a fact. I think that I understand the hesitation around that. And I will say, you know, there's definitely a lot of like, lots of threads in Hacker News and stuff like that that talk about how you can't do both at the same time. And it's not easy to do both at the same time. Yeah. But I would say that determined entrepreneurs who have a lot of support on the family side of things, it's certainly doable. And there's been so many more examples now of women who have either raised money and started families at the same time, or who are parents. And there's certainly a ton of examples of men who've done that, but they are just not talked about, right? So in any event, yes, I was very fortunate that even though I was just about to pop, that was when I received my first ever angel check. And then the funniest thing is the second time I had a kid, it was a scheduled C-section. So it was like in my Google Calendar and everything. And I did pitch a VC the day before. And I remember walking into the office and they said, wow, you know, because I don't think they definitely did not know. It was my first time meeting them. So they did not know that I was so pregnant. So I walked in and they said, oh, you know, when are you due? And I said, tomorrow morning. It's like scheduled in my calendar. And needless to say, they did not give me a term sheet, but yeah, you know, I think people are capable of anything. And honestly, I think that any kind of experience, including parenting or health issues or other things, it just increases your empathy. And I think it does actually make you a better entrepreneur, any kind of variety of life experience.
100%. I think you hit the head on the nail there. And it's fascinating because I also had a similar experience where one of my managers at the firm I work at was pregnant all throughout like my time there, and I didn't even know. Well, granted, you know, everything was virtual, but it did not affect, you know, her work performance. She was earliest to the meetings. She was still like giving it her 200%. And she worked till the very last day and, you know, came back to work, I believe, like 2 months after. So it was a really awesome thing to see. And I just want to say that I think, you know, you're a true inspiration out there for all the women and female entrepreneurs. So definitely just wanted to relay that.
Yeah, thanks. And I do think I meet a lot of women entrepreneurs and try to help as much as I can, because I got a ton of help as well. And I will say it is very common, a huge source of anxiety for women entrepreneurs around timing of, you know, if they do want to start a family, around timing, and then how it will be received by their investors. Yeah, I wish it wasn't like that, but it's a very common thing, because you can't fully control the timeline of having kids. Nor can you fully control the timeline, I think, of raising money either, but more so raising money than having kids, for sure. But yeah, so I do think yes, my message to investors out there is I don't think you truly support women entrepreneurs if you don't support mom entrepreneurs.
I think,
1000.
yeah, I think that there's a lot of truth in this. You know, I had an experience, I think around last year where we were like building one of our teams out at Celsius, and we were interviewing people, and I think we made an offer to someone, and you know, we did all of our interviews remotely, and then she told our CFO, you know, that she was actually 7 months pregnant, and like it didn't come up during the interviews and stuff, and it was like a really, well, like it was like a brand new situation for me because this person was gonna join like the team that I was on, and it was like really important that we like that we had to like train someone to do this work. So it was like it was interesting to see like the overall like how people like navigated the situation. Overall, like you know, I remember when I was growing up, like my mom working, you know, while I was there. So I think it was something that I was like, you know, you know, hire another person for when she is on leave, and then when we come back there'll be plenty of work for two people, you know. But it's a really delicate situation sometimes, you know, see how people react.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think it is, you know, you want to have a plan for it as much as you can, you know. So I'm not, you know, there definitely is coordination and logistics that has to happen for sure.
Yeah, but I think to your point, it's just like as to like when you originally were talking about like where people like put their energy and time and resources, like it's oftentimes people don't you know, sometimes they don't want to talk about this stuff for whatever reasons, but in reality it's like we need to be empathetic, right? And we need to accept that these things are reality, and you know, just kind of work with people to plan and do logistics like you said.
Yeah. And I actually, I mean, I truly, I look back to pre-kid work versus post-kid work, and I do feel like I'm much better at prioritization, and I am more effective and efficient now. And so like overarching, I remember when I was doing consulting, I would work 100-hour weeks. I obviously do not do that anymore. Um, but I don't know that I was working efficiently back then, if that makes sense. And there's definitely diminishing returns, you know? And so I think so much of startup life is thinking about what is going to move the needle every day. It's just like a big exercise in prioritization and figuring out what's important and what's not important and what's enough. And that's sort of the juggling act that every parent does fairly naturally too. So yeah, I think it's just like a part of life. And you know, people say if you want something done, give it to a busy mom. And I definitely feel like that actually is true in a lot of ways.
100%, 100%.
Yeah, totally. So I had a really hard pivot question here.
Sure.
And I think you are probably like one of the best people to ask this, considering you're, you know, dealing head on with the mortality side of things. So have you heard of the 2045 initiative, Suelin?
I'm not sure. Tell me.
Okay. Okay, yeah. So it was an initiative started by a Russian billionaire. And the whole premise behind the initiative was to sort of download our consciousness into a artificial body. And you know, there's a lot of research and development going on in that space. And of course, like, you know, with Neuralink coming into the market, there's a lot of implications with, you know, like just our memory data and all of that. And right now it might not seem pragmatic, but you know, who knows? Obviously technology and its functionality is exponential. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on you know, either businesses or large VCs pouring in money into I guess trying to keep us immortal,
Yeah,
or you know, make us immortal. So yeah, just
sure.
wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I definitely have thoughts. So it is funny. I do feel like there's kind of two kind of camps in the longevity death tech economy, right? There's the camp of people who are trying to make us immortal, and there's a lot of there's a lot of companies doing that beyond the 2045 initiative, right? There's a lot of companies doing flavors of that. Like even that, you have you guys seen that episode of Black Mirror? Anyway, there's an episode of Black Mirror about yeah. So
which
there's
one? Yeah.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Well, I was thinking of the one where I think he's like chatting with his loved one who passed away, but it's like an
Oh my God.
AI.
Is it where,
Yeah,
I think it's where the husband passes away and then the wife like
I
subscribes to
think
one of those
so.
services that like
Yeah.
reconstructs him and like she can talk to him.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
That
And
one
so
was
I do sometimes joke with my team that our market is so like recession proof. Like the only thing that would really like external force that would be really tough for us is if we all become immortal and then like we maybe don't have a market. But honestly, I feel like that is so far away, right? Like certainly there's going to be advancements in extending lifespan and health span. And I welcome that. So what we're doing is not diametrically opposed to wanting to live longer and live a healthier, more enjoyable lives. Like we are 100% in support of that. But we're also quite pragmatic in that, yeah, and then one day your physical body will die. And then what do you do? And then as human beings, how do you make meaning out of that, right? There's so many overlapping trends that makes that even more complex today. The trends of, what we've all lived through, the pandemic, the trend of people being, there's less people in organized religion, which means there actually is less guidance that people can follow and less kind of script around what rituals and things like that will be healing for when you experience loss, right? And there's a trend of us being more digital and more online than ever before. So all of these things kind of create this rich environment for people where there are a lot of options, but it's really confusing as a consumer to know what your options even are and to chart that path. And so that's kind of where we come in. And so when I think about these sort of immortality companies from this perspective of like downloading your consciousness or whatever, I think it's really interesting. I think that it's sort of like, well, let me just think about, give some context for like where we are today. So even 100 years ago, or like my grandparents, when they passed away, you basically go through boxes of papers, right? Now, when we pass away, I would imagine my grandkids are going to be able to Google me, right? Like I can't Google my grandparents, but my grandkids will probably be able to Google me. And so in olden times, like not that long ago, like 50, 100 years ago, you have a tombstone, a piece of stone, because that's what lasts across generations. But now our traces on the internet are going to last much longer, right? I think like the internet is forever, right? Isn't that what people say? Yeah. So I feel like what that means is that there is this other thread of activity that I think younger people like naturally think about and older people are starting to think more about, which is how do you curate your online presence to reflect who you really are? Because what do you want your great grandkids to Google about you, So I think, so that's kind of, I feel like where we are today. And then if you take that a step further, then you go into like, can you recreate the consciousness of you, and can your loved ones chat with you and interact with you, but is it you? And then, then you get to this like more almost, like science
Very
fiction
abstract.
but also just like thinking about who are we and what does consciousness, right, which I think are all really interesting things. But I think there's certainly, it's just different. They're trying to solve a different problem. And I also think like if we see some of these companies really start to be successful, and then we will naturally include them on our platform, right? So the way our platform works is that we have all, more than 110,000 people a day on our site. And then we use AI to match those people to solutions that they need. So we can kind of figure out, are you here because you want to do end of life planning? Or are you here because you just experienced loss and you're trying to figure out what you have to do? And so, and then if you are someone who's like trying to figure out how to achieve some semblance of immortality, then as these these vendors or these providers of these solutions mature and we can vet them, then we want to kind of help consumers compare. Well, here are the different types and here's how you choose. Just as, you know, some of these sectors are starting to mature. I don't know if you guys know this, but now today in the US, cremation has surpassed traditional burial as the most common way that people choose to, you know, what to do with their bodies, basically. And so now, because
Wow.
there's so much cremation, there's all these companies that are like cool things to do with cremated remains or meaningful things to do with those cremated remains, because otherwise you just have ashes lying around and people want to do things that are more meaningful. So there's companies like Better Place Forest where you can sprinkle them in kind of nature, or companies like Eternova where you can turn it into a diamond and wear it as jewelry. There's so many different things now.
Wow.
So these industries, as you know, consumer behavior shifts, these industries emerge. And then our role in that ecosystem is that we can help consumers navigate and figure out what are their choices, which companies are legit, you know, and then try to give them what they need. So I think so much of this space, what's hard is people don't know what they don't know. Like people don't know you can get your ashes shot into space or become a coral reef, right? So like we want to help people see that there are all these options available to them. And so I would say that the sort of like downloading your consciousness quest for immortality is one option, right? But even before that technology is more real, I feel like there's interim options like curating your legacy online so that you know, anyone who's trying to understand who you are, that you have sort of a say. So it's not like Google SEO having a say and like what people find about you, but that you're actually putting something out there and telling your own story essentially. And I think a lot of people, at least a lot of our customers we've seen, there's a lot of meaning in thinking about what is it that you want to pass on? You know, what is the wisdom you want to pass on, or the life lessons, or what is your life story? Because everyone's life story is important and unique and add something to the world. And so we encourage people to think about that and think about how they want their loved ones who live beyond them, how should those people think about you and how should they celebrate your life, right? So those are definitely things we encourage.
Thank you so much for that insight.
Yeah, sure.
Amazing.
Yeah, I know. It's like, it's so funny. I always think about it. There's like us on one side where there's a bunch of companies trying to solve for like the reality and the inevitability of death. And then there's like all the companies that are like the blood boys, you know, in Silicon Valley and like the achieving immortality through AI and stuff like that, which is like, again, like we have no like necessarily judgment against that. It's just more like we're just solving different parts of truly, I think the core question, which is like, wow, what does it mean to be a human being? And the fact that we are not here forever, like, what does that actually mean? I think we're all trying to get at that a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. Very, very well said. So I really appreciate those insights. I think that's a great way to wrap up this conversation. I guess the very last question I have is, you know, Cake has obviously had a lot of success, a lot of growth, you know, raising venture capital, one of, you know, the top startup to watch in Boston. What's next for y'all? What's kind of the big goal for 2022?
Yeah, thanks. I'm relieved that my last comment was not about blood boys. So for us, we're just super excited to keep growing and scaling and using our data expertise to really help people and match people to the solutions that they truly need. There's so much unmet need in this category, and we get love letters from users every day of people that we're helping, people who are dealing with some really hard things in life. And it's so gratifying to be able to help these people and then to do it at scale and to help as many people as we can. We think it's like, it's almost like an access issue, you know, to access this type of information about what to do and what's available. And we don't want people to be reinventing the wheel each time. We really want to be a trusted place where people can find information about what they need and guidance in this space that can be really hard. Yeah, so we're excited to keep growing and keep providing even better solutions for people.